My name is Mumia Abu-Jamal. I'm on death row in Pennsylvania. Ex-president of the Association of Black Journalists in Philadelphia. I'm still a continuing revolutionary journalist. I write for anybody who wants me to write for them. And I'm fighting my conviction, fighting the sentence, fighting for my life, and fighting to create revolution in America. Yes, I am a political prisoner.
Mumia first started writing me in 1985, and finally in 1991, a very long time ago, during a meeting, I finally decided that I just did not have the time to represent him, because I had other death penalty clients. I recommended another attorney. In late 2002, we were again in contact, and he asked would I reconsider. And in a meeting in early 2003, in a very long meeting with him, when he asked me this time, I realized I could not say no a second time because his case had a lot of problems. He needed expert help, and which he had not had.
Revolution means change. It means total change.
Lawyers in the 1990s, 1995, 97, 98, 2000, just before I took over the case, did not raise some basic issues that could save his life. When I come into the case in 2003 and try to raise issues that they should have raised, the judges say, no, it's too late. You should have raised, those issues should have been raised years ago. I'll give you an example. The trial judge was a monster. He was a racist and a bigot. He called my client during the trial in speaking to another judge. He referred to my client as a nigger, which is the most offensive way to refer to a fellow human being in America. He also said, I'm going to help them, the prosecution, I'm going to help them fry the niggers, referring to frying being like executing. And so the judge was horrible. He excluded Mumia during part of the trial. He'd make remarks that would affect the jury in a very negative way. The problem is that the lawyers did not raise this issue. They did not accuse the judge of being prejudiced at trial. What they did in their papers was accuse him of being prejudiced at a hearing 13 years later, but not at trial. The jury, the prosecution used racism in selecting the jury. It systematically removed people who were black from sitting on the jury. I'm in federal court arguing this issue in the United States Court of Appeals for the Third Circuit in Philadelphia about three and a half years ago before a three-judge panel. It's like arguing before God, you know. And so one of the judges asked me, I'm presenting all this evidence about racism. One of the judges said, but Mr. Bryan, do we know what the racial composition was of the panel from which the jury was selected? Well, the answer is no, we do not have that. The reason is because the previous lawyers did not get that information, and it would have been simple to do. I've never lost a capital case. This one really worries me, and the reason it worries me, one of the reasons, is because I feel like sometimes my Mumia's in cuffs. Sometimes I feel like I'm cuffed as a lawyer also because I can't present evidence, present some things that should be before the courts because of his own lawyers. And what's important about this is not just for him, but in case after case after case in the U.S. and in other countries, people get executed not because they necessarily committed the worst crime or they're even guilty. They get executed because they're poorly represented. They do not have good lawyers. They're too poor to afford good lawyers. And Mumia is a classic example.
On the morning of the inauguration, one high-ranking guard reportedly announced over the PA system, he, speaking of Obama, may have won. In my eyes, he's still a nigger. He also stated, there will be no showers or yard today. We're going to show you niggers who run this SMU. Men were handcuffed, sprayed with hot pepper mace, blinded, stripped naked, and beaten in retaliation for exercising their alleged constitutional right to file a civil rights suit in an American court on the same day that Obama was taking the oath of office, telling the nation and the world that we do not torture. From death row, this is Mumia Abu-Jamal.
Well, Mumia, when he was arrested, was a very well-known journalist, a radio journalist. And his radio reports, his newscasts, which were not only in Philadelphia, but some of them nationally throughout the United States, he spoke out against police corruption, governmental corruption, and that type of thing. He became known as the voice of the voiceless because he spoke out for the downtrodden, for people who could not speak for themselves. When he was placed on death row, the prosecution thought that they could silence his voice, silence his pen, take his pen away from him. What's happened, ironically, is being on death row, he's now heard by more people in the radio because he telephones out and does tape records commentaries from death row, but also those are transcribed and they're published in newspapers in various languages. And so he's heard today by more people, and the prosecution, the government, wants to shut him up because he keeps speaking out about things like women's rights, the horror of war, the importance of education, about poor people, the terrible things that my country, the United States, did and is doing in Iraq, that type of thing, waterboarding, Guantanamo. And so he's a real irritant to the establishment, and they really want to silence his voice. So this case is about the death penalty, and it's also about politics, and it's about racism. I have a client who would not be on death row if he were not an outspoken journalist. He would not be on death row if he were not black. He would not be on death row if he were not poor. And you know what? They're not going to shut him up. He's going to keep speaking, and we've got to keep him alive. We cannot let them kill him. The title of the petition is not just Mumia. It's Mumia and the global abolition of the death penalty. And we're asking President Obama to speak out about the death penalty, not only in the United States, but for the whole world as a member of the global community. And if we get enough signatures, and we need everybody in Portugal, for example, we need everybody to sign it. But if we get enough signatures, that it cannot be ignored. And then it's presented by a distinguished delegation, including Nobel Prize winners from around the world, people like Bishop Desmond Tutu. We want it so powerful. We want the voice of the world heard by President Obama, the voices of the world, the people of the world. And we want it so strong that he can't ignore it. And what he should do, at the very least, is suggest that all the countries, like Iran, the United States, Vietnam, etc., declare a moratorium. Because not only is the death penalty morally wrong, but aside from that, the process that results in people getting the death penalty is flawed. We as humans, I make mistakes, you make mistakes, we all do. And when a person's life is on the line, that's too arbitrary a process where people make mistakes. Innocent people get executed. In the United States, at least, being against the death penalty is not politically popular. As a matter of fact, most politicians, if a politician declares that he or she is against the death penalty, it's political suicide, except for places like Berkeley or San Francisco. However, we need to raise the consciousness of the public and the president, whom represents them, that there must be a better way to deal with the problems of violence, not only in American society but around the world, than killing each other. I mean, it's terrible. I mean, I mentioned I was recently at the World Congress, spoke at the World Congress against the death penalty in Geneva, and I look at material from Iran, and they have actually documented details of every person executed in Iran in modern times, the children, the men, the women, and it'd break your heart reading about that. And that's not acceptable in modern day society. We're supposed to be better than that. It's remarkable because people are committing suicide on death rows. They're being driven crazy, living day in and day out under sentences of death. It's a terrible existence, and they're all in solitary confinement. But, it sounds like a cliche, but it's true that his mind is free. They have not locked up his mind. And Mumia reads constantly, he writes constantly, and so his body may be in a small dark cell on the death row, but his mind, his spirit is free, and so he's very good. To answer your question, he's worried, of course. He does not want to die. He's concerned of what the courts, our conservative American courts, are doing. But by the same token, he's good. He's I think you'd be surprised how strong he is. It's interesting that some of us working on the case get discouraged. It's difficult, and then one speaks to him a few minutes, and one feels better. I mean, we should be helping him, but he's helping us. I mean, he's fine. He's doing very well. He's a remarkable person. Of all the people I've represented facing the death penalty, there's none. I've never met any like him. He's special. He's not better than it. He'll tell you, and he's not any better than anyone else. But he is special, and it's a real pleasure to be fighting for him.
From death row, this is Mumia Abu-Jamal.